The massive crystal dome of the Imperial Arena gleamed under three suns as thousands of alien spectators filled the floating seats. Emperor Zarthok, a towering reptilian being with scales that shifted between gold and crimson, sat on his throne overlooking the battlefield below. His six eyes focused on the arena floor where his prized possession waited. Virakthul was not just any dragon. Standing 40 feet tall with wings that could block out the light of a small moon, the creature was a legend across the galaxy. Its hide was darker than space itself, and its eyes burned with the fury of dying stars. For 300 years, no warrior, no weapon, no army had ever touched the beast. It was the Emperor's ultimate symbol of power. Today marked another grand spectacle. Representatives from 12 different species had come to witness the traditional challenge of submission. Each species would send their finest warrior to face the dragon. Not to kill it, but simply to land a single blow. Just one touch that showed the creature could be reached by mortal hands. The first challenger stepped forward, a massive Thracian warrior, his forearms each holding a different weapon. His people were known across the galaxy as the finest fighters, their strength legendary even among the stars. The crowd fell silent as the warrior charged across the sandy arena floor. Virakthul moved like liquid shadow. Before the Thracian could swing his first weapon, a tail the size of a tree trunk sent him flying into the barrier wall. The impact shook the entire dome. The warrior slumped to the ground, unconscious but alive. The dragon had not even used its claws. Next came a Zentaurian assassin, her body modified with cybernetic enhancements that made her faster than thought itself. She became a blur of motion, appearing and disappearing around the dragon in patterns too quick for most eyes to follow. But Virakthul tracked her perfectly. A single breath of superheated plasma turned the sand where she stood into glass. She teleported away at the last second, but the effort left her drained and defeated. The challenges continued for hours. A swarm of hive-mind warriors attacked together, their coordination perfect. The dragon's roar alone shattered their mental link and sent them fleeing in terror. A crystalline being tried to match the dragon's strength directly, only to be crushed by a casual swipe of one massive claw. Each failure made Emperor Zarthok's satisfaction grow. His dragon remained untouchable, proving once again that his power was absolute. The other species representatives watched in growing despair as their champions fell one by one. Then something unexpected happened. From the viewing section reserved for the newest members of the Galactic Council, a small figure stood up. The Emperor's translator informed him that it was from the recently discovered species called humans. The creature was barely 5 feet tall, with pale skin and strange yellow hair that caught the arena lights. "I request permission to face the dragon," the human said in accented galactic standard. Laughter erupted throughout the arena. The sound was not cruel but amazed. This tiny being wanted to challenge what others called the untouchable. Even the Emperor found himself amused rather than offended. "What is your name, small one?" Emperor Zarthok asked, his voice booming through the arena's amplification system. "Maya Chen, your Imperial Majesty," the human replied with a respectful bow. "I am a xenobiologist from Earth." More laughter rippled through the crowd. "A scientist? Not even a warrior?" The Emperor's amusement grew. Perhaps this would provide entertainment value even if it lasted only seconds. "You understand," the Emperor said, "that failure means death? My dragon shows mercy to warriors, but it has little patience for those who waste its time." Maya nodded. "I understand the risks, Your Majesty, but I believe I can succeed where others have failed." The Emperor gestured toward the arena entrance. "Then by all means, little human, show us what your species believes passes for courage." Maya walked down the ramp leading to the arena floor. Her steps were steady, showing no fear despite the impossibility of her task. She wore simple clothes and carried no weapons. In her hand was only a small device that most assumed was some kind of recording equipment. As she entered the arena proper, Virakthul turned its massive head toward her. The dragon's burning eyes examined this new challenger with what seemed like curiosity rather than aggression. Perhaps it too was puzzled by the human's confidence. Maya walked to the center of the arena and stopped about 50 feet from the dragon. She held up her hands to show they were empty except for the small device. "Hello, Virakthul," she said in a clear voice that carried across the suddenly quiet arena. "I know you can understand me. I've studied your species for months, learning about your intelligence and your nature." The dragon tilted its massive head. No challenger had ever spoken to it before. They had all simply attacked or prepared for battle. This was something entirely new. Maya activated her device, and a series of complex musical tones filled the arena. The sounds were unlike anything most of the audience had ever heard, following mathematical patterns that seemed to resonate with something deep and primal. Virak Thul's eyes widened. The dragon's aggressive posture began to change. Its wings folded closer to its body and its head lowered slightly. The burning fury in its eyes transformed into something else entirely. "You see?" Maya continued, her voice gentle but carrying clearly. "I didn't come here to fight you. I came here to understand you. Your species isn't just intelligent. You're empathic. You feel the emotions and intentions of those around you." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, his amusement turning to concern. What was this human doing? How did she know about traits of Virak Thul that even he had never suspected? Maya took a step closer to the dragon, then another. The massive creature made no move to attack. Instead, it seemed almost mesmerized by the continuing musical tones and the human's calm approach. "For 300 years, Maya said, every challenger has come to you filled with aggression, fear, or the desire to prove themselves. You've responded to that emotional state the only way you could. But I'm not here to fight you, Virak Thul. I'm here to offer you something you've never had." She took another step forward, now close enough that the dragon's breath ruffled her hair. "I'm here to offer you friendship." The arena fell into absolute silence. 50,000 beings from across the galaxy held their breath as the small human continued her impossible approach toward the legendary dragon. Even Emperor Zarthok found himself gripping the arms of his throne, unsure whether to be furious or fascinated. Maya continued speaking in her gentle voice as she moved closer to Virak Thul. "The musical sequence I'm playing contains mathematical harmonies that your species evolved to recognize as peaceful communication. Your people were once part of a great civilization that valued art and knowledge above conquest." The dragon's massive head descended until it was level with Maya's position. Up close, each of Virak Thul's eyes was larger than the human's entire head. The creature's breathing created small windstorms that threatened to knock Maya off her feet. But she stood firm. "Your imperial records are incomplete, Your Majesty," Maya called out, addressing the Emperor while never taking her eyes off the dragon. "They describe Virak Thul as a weapon, a creature bred for battle. But that's not what dragons truly are." Emperor Zarthok's scales shifted to a darker red, a sign of growing anger among his species. "You dare suggest that I don't know my own dragon, human?" Maya finally turned to face the Emperor, though she kept one hand extended toward Virak Thul. "With respect, Your Majesty, I suggest that you know only what your dragon has been forced to become. Virak Thul has spent 3 centuries responding to the emotions of those who approach with violence or fear. But dragons are naturally empathic beings. They mirror what they feel from others." The musical tones from Maya's device shifted to a new pattern, even more complex than before. Virak Thul's eyes began to show something that no one in the arena had ever seen before. The burning fury was fading, replaced by what looked almost like curiosity. "When your ancestors first captured Virak Thul," Maya continued, "they broke something inside this magnificent creature. They took a being that was meant to soar between stars in search of knowledge and beauty, and they chained it to an arena floor to fight for entertainment." Several alien dignitaries in the viewing sections began muttering among themselves. The humans' words were challenging not just the Emperor's power, but the entire foundation of the challenge tradition that had existed for centuries. Maya turned back to the dragon and extended both hands. "But you remember, don't you, Virak Thul? You remember what it felt like before the chains and the fights and the endless parade of warriors trying to prove themselves against you?" Something extraordinary began to happen. Virak Thul's massive form started to settle onto the arena floor. The dragon lowered its great head until its snout was just inches from Maya's outstretched hands. The creature's eyes, which had burned with rage for 300 years, now showed something that looked unmistakably like hope. Emperor Zarthok rose from his throne, his voice booming across the arena. "Enough of this nonsense. Guard, remove the human before she—" "Your Majesty," interrupted Ambassador Veltar, the Emperor's chief advisor. The elderly Altarian's blue skin had paled considerably as he watched the scene below. "I think you should see this." The Emperor followed his advisor's gaze back to the arena floor. Maya had done something that every being present would remember for the rest of their lives. She had placed her small human hand directly on Virakthul's massive snout. The dragon had not moved to attack. Instead, Virakthul had closed its eyes and was making a sound that no one had ever heard before. It was not a roar or a growl, but something almost musical. The sound resonated through the arena's structure, vibrating in harmonics that seemed to touch something deep in every listener's soul. "Impossible," breathed the Thorakian representative. "The dragon, it's purring?" Maya smiled as she gently stroked the ancient creature's hide. "Not purring, exactly. Dragons express contentment through harmonic resonance. Virakthul is singing." The implications hit the emperor like a physical blow. For 3 centuries, his empire's greatest symbol of power had been suffering. The untouchable dragon that struck fear into the hearts of his enemies was actually a tortured being crying out for connection. "How?" Emperor Zarthok demanded. "How did you know?" Maya looked up at the imperial throne while continuing to maintain contact with the dragon. "My species has a saying, Your Majesty. To understand something, you must first try to see it as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. I spent months studying every available record about dragons, not as weapons, but as living beings." She activated another function on her device, and a holographic display appeared above the arena. It showed ancient star charts and fragments of dragon civilization from before the Great Wars that had scattered their species across the galaxy. Dragons weren't predators or weapons, Maya explained as the crowd watched the historical data unfold. They were explorers, artists, and philosophers. They traveled between worlds not to conquer, but to learn and create. Virakthul's aggression isn't its nature, it's trauma. The hologram showed images of dragons working alongside other species, creating massive works of art that spanned entire star systems, and contributing to scientific discoveries that had advanced galactic civilization by centuries. "Your people," Maya said, addressing not just the emperor but the entire assembled crowd, "have been witnessing the results of 300 years of psychological torment. Every challenger who entered this arena brought emotions of aggression, fear, or superiority. Virakthul had no choice but to respond in kind." Ambassador Veltar approached the emperor's throne cautiously. "Your Majesty, if the human is correct, then the challenge of submission has been torture," the emperor finished quietly. The realization was spreading through his consciousness like ice water. His greatest symbol of power was actually evidence of his empire's greatest failure of understanding. Down in the arena, something even more remarkable was happening. Virakthul had begun to move again, but not with the predatory grace that everyone expected. Instead, the dragon was moving with careful gentleness, repositioning itself so that Maya could more easily maintain contact. The ancient creature opened its eyes and looked directly up at Emperor Zarthok. For the first time in 3 centuries, the dragon's gaze held no rage, no defiance, no burning fury. Instead, Virakthul looked at its captor with what could only be described as profound sadness. The emperor felt something crack inside his chest. In that moment, he saw himself not as a powerful ruler, commanding respect through strength, but as the being responsible for centuries of unnecessary suffering. Maya's voice carried clearly through the arena's perfect acoustics. "Virakthul doesn't want to fight anymore, Your Majesty. This magnificent being wants to go home." The words "wants to go home" echoed through the crystal dome like a physical force. Emperor Zarthok felt the weight of 50,000 stares as every being in the arena processed what they had just witnessed. The untouchable dragon, the ultimate symbol of imperial power, was not a weapon at all. It was a prisoner. Maya continued to maintain gentle contact with Virakthul while addressing the crowd. "The star charts I've studied show that dragons once had a homeworld called Drakvelion. It was destroyed in the Galactic Wars 500 years ago, but the survivors established colonies in 3 different systems." The emperor's mind raced. If the human was correct, if dragons were really a peaceful species that had been scattered and traumatized by war, then everything about his empire's relationship with Virakthul was built on a fundamental misunderstanding. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Veltar whispered urgently, "the implications of this are staggering. If word spreads that our greatest symbol of power is actually suffering—" "I know what it means," the emperor snapped, but his usual authority felt hollow. Looking down at the arena, he watched as Virakthul gently nuzzled against Maya's small form. The dragon's massive bulk could have crushed the human accidentally, but every movement was careful and controlled. Maya looked up at the imperial throne again. "I have a proposal, Your Majesty. Let me take Virakthul to find its people. Let this magnificent being experience freedom for the first time in 3 centuries. The arena erupted in shocked murmurs. Representatives from a dozen species began talking urgently among themselves. The idea was revolutionary, dangerous, and completely unprecedented. "Absolutely not," Emperor Zarthok declared, his voice booming with renewed authority. "Virakthul is the cornerstone of imperial power. Without the dragon, our enemies would see weakness. They would challenge our authority." Maya's expression remained calm, but her voice carried a new edge of determination. "With respect, Your Majesty, what enemies? You've ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries through fear of this dragon. But fear isn't the same thing as respect. And power built on the suffering of others isn't really power at all. It's just cruelty with better publicity." Several alien representatives actually gasped at the human's boldness. No one spoke to Emperor Zarthok that way and lived. But something about Maya's continued connection with Virakthul seemed to protect her. The dragon had positioned itself between the human and the Imperial guards, though its posture remained peaceful. "You don't understand the complexities of galactic politics. Human," the Emperor said, but his voice lacked its usual commanding presence. "Without strength, without the respect that comes from power, the Empire would collapse into chaos." Maya smiled sadly. "Your Majesty, I've spent the last 6 months studying not just dragons, but the history of your empire. Do you know what I found most interesting?" She activated her device again, and new holographic displays appeared around the arena. These showed economic data, trade routes, and diplomatic communications spanning the last 3 centuries. "Your empire doesn't actually rule through fear of the dragon," Maya continued. "Oh, the dragon demonstrations certainly make impressive theater. But your real power comes from something much more valuable. You've created the most efficient trade network in galactic history. You've established universal translation protocols. You've maintained peace between species that were at war for millennia. Before your empire united them, the data floating above the arena began to paint a picture that many of the representatives had never seen clearly before. The Emperor's true achievement wasn't military conquest, but the creation of a stable, prosperous galactic civilization. The challenge of submission," Maya explained, "was never really about proving the dragon was untouchable. It was about demonstrating that your empire was strong enough to maintain order. But you don't need to torture an innocent being to prove that." Emperor Zarthok found himself actually listening to the human's words, rather than simply planning her punishment. The data she was presenting was accurate. His advisors could confirm that much with simple verification checks. "What are you suggesting?" he asked cautiously. Maya's hand never left Virakthul's snout as she spoke. "I'm suggesting that your empire is strong enough to show mercy. That you're powerful enough to admit when something was wrong and make it right. The galaxy will respect that more than they fear any dragon. And if you're wrong," the Emperor demanded. "If releasing the dragon is seen as weakness and rebellion spreads across the systems, then I'll personally return to face your justice," Maya replied without hesitation. "But I don't think that will happen. I think you'll discover that ruling through respect and justice creates much stronger loyalty than ruling through fear ever could." Virakthul made another one of those musical sounds. This one deeper and more complex than before. Maya closed her eyes and seemed to listen to harmonics that others couldn't detect. "What is it saying?" Emperor Zarthok asked, despite himself. Maya opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. "Virakthul is asking if you would like to know what dragons really think about your empire." The Emperor hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse to maintain his illusions about his dragon's loyalty, but a larger part, the part that had built a galactic civilization through intelligence rather than brute force, needed to know the truth. "Tell me," he said quietly. Maya placed both hands on the dragon's massive head and closed her eyes again. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from Virakthul itself. "Virakthul says that your empire has brought peace to the galaxy. The dragon has watched through the arena's displays as your rule prevented countless wars and created prosperity for billions of beings. Virakthul is proud to have been part of that, even though the cost was personal freedom." The Emperor's scales shifted through several color phases as he processed this information. "It approves of what we've built?" "More than that," Maya continued, still channeling the dragon's thoughts. Virakthul believes that your empire represents the best hope for lasting galactic peace. But the dragon also believes that your empire is strong enough now to maintain that peace, without requiring anyone's suffering. Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at the Emperor. Virakthul wants to help you transform your empire from one based on fear into one based on genuine cooperation. The dragon knows where other scattered members of its species are hiding. It knows about ancient technologies and knowledge that could benefit everyone, but that knowledge can only be shared freely, never taken by force. The arena remained absolutely silent as everyone waited for the Emperor's response. The decision he made in the next few moments would reshape not just his empire, but the entire galaxy's understanding of power, mercy, and what it truly meant to rule. Emperor Zarthok looked down at the small human who had accomplished the impossible. She had not only touched the untouchable dragon, but had revealed truths that would change everything. Emperor Zarthok descended from his throne for the first time during a challenge ceremony in over 2 centuries. His massive form moved with the careful dignity of absolute power, but something had changed in his bearing. The representatives watched in stunned silence as the ruler of the galaxy walked down the ramp toward the arena floor. Maya maintained her connection with Virakthul, but her attention focused on the approaching emperor. The dragon's musical humming grew softer, and its great head turned to watch its captors approach, with eyes that held no trace of the old fury. "In 300 years, the emperor said as he entered the arena proper, "no being has ever spoken to me the way you have, human. Others have tried to challenge my authority through force or cunning, but you've done something far more dangerous." Maya straightened but kept one hand on Virakthul's snout. "What's that, Your Majesty?" "You've made me question whether my authority deserves to exist at all." The Emperor stopped about 20 feet away from Maya and the dragon. This close, his true size was overwhelming, nearly 15 feet tall with scales that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. But instead of projecting menace, his posture suggested thoughtful consideration. "Tell me, Maya Chen of Earth," the Emperor continued, "what happens to galactic stability if I simply release Virakthul? What happens to the carefully maintained balance of power that has prevented system wars for 3 centuries? Maya had clearly been expecting this question. "Your Majesty, may I show you something?" At the Emperor's nod, Maya activated a new function on her device. The holographic displays above the arena shifted to show current political and economic data from across the empire. "These are real-time readings from your own governmental databases," Maya explained. "Look at the rebellion indices, the trade disruption patterns, the diplomatic stress measurements." The Emperor studied the data with the analytical mind that had built his empire. What he saw surprised him. The numbers are stable, more stable than they've been in decades. "Exactly," Maya said. "Your empire isn't held together by fear of the dragon anymore, Your Majesty. It's held together by the benefits of cooperation. Your trade networks provide prosperity. Your legal frameworks provide justice. Your diplomatic corps prevents conflicts before they start." She gestured to the alien representatives watching from above. "Every species in this arena has more wealth, more security, and more freedom under your rule than they had in the chaos before the Empire. They don't serve you because they fear Virakthul. They serve you because you've made their lives better." Virakthul made another musical sound, and Maya paused to listen to the harmonics. "What is the dragon saying now?" the Emperor asked. "Virakthul is sharing memories," Maya replied, her voice taking on an almost trance-like quality. "Images of what the galaxy was like before your empire. The constant wars, the trade disputes that escalated into system-wide conflicts, the suffering of billions of beings caught in endless cycles of violence." The Emperor found himself stepping closer, drawn by the musical sounds coming from his dragon. "And what does Virakthul think of those memories?" "The dragon is grateful," Maya said simply. "Grateful that your empire stopped the chaos, even though the price was Virakthul's own freedom. But now the dragon wants to help you build something even better." "Which is what exactly?" Maya's eyes opened and she looked directly at the Emperor with an expression of absolute conviction. "An empire that doesn't need symbols of fear to maintain order. An empire that rules through genuine consent rather than intimidation. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, processing not just Maya's words but the implications of everything that had happened. Finally, he spoke. Ambassador Veltar, he called to his advisor in the viewing section. What are the current approval ratings for imperial rule across all member systems? The elderly Altarian consulted his datapad quickly. 87% average, Your Majesty, the highest in our recorded history. And how many of our member systems have requested increases in their Imperial Guard presence in the last year? None, Your Majesty. In fact, 14 systems have requested reductions, stating that local security forces are sufficient for maintaining order. Emperor Zarthok nodded slowly. The data supported Maya's analysis. His empire was stronger than it had ever been, and that strength came from success, not fear. There's something else you should know, Your Majesty, Maya said softly. I've been in communication with the dragon colonies that still exist. They've been watching your empire's development for centuries, hoping for exactly this moment. What moment? The moment when your empire became strong enough to choose compassion over control. Maya activated her device one final time. The holographic display showed star charts marking 3 different systems at the edge of Imperial space. These are the dragon colonies. Each one holds knowledge and technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Medical advances that could extend life for all species. Engineering techniques that could make space travel faster and safer. Agricultural methods that could end hunger on 1,000 worlds. The Emperor stared at the star charts. And they would share this knowledge? Not with an empire that rules through fear, Maya said, but with an empire that demonstrates wisdom and mercy? Yes. Virak Thul has been sending them reports about your rule for decades, waiting for the right moment to make contact. Reports? The Emperor looked at his dragon with new understanding. You've been communicating with your people all this time? Virak Thul's musical response was complex and layered. Maya translated. Dragons communicate across vast distances through harmonic resonance. Virak Thul has been serving as an observer, reporting on whether your empire was developing into something worthy of contact. And your conclusion? The Emperor asked the dragon directly. This time, Virak Thul's response was clear enough that the Emperor didn't need translation. The dragon's harmonics carried tones of approval, respect, and something that sounded remarkably like hope. Maya smiled. Virak Thul believes that you've created something unprecedented in galactic history, an empire that has grown beyond the need for symbols of domination. The dragon wants to help you take the next step, which is transform from an empire that maintains peace through strength into a confederation that creates peace through cooperation. Emperor Zarthok looked around the arena at the representatives from dozens of species, all waiting to see what he would decide. For 3 centuries, his word had been law across the galaxy. Now, for the first time, he was being asked to voluntarily limit that power in favor of something greater. The Emperor looked at Maya, then at Virak Thul, then up at the assembled representatives. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power, making a choice that would reshape the galaxy. Very well, Maya Chen of Earth. I will take the greatest gamble in the history of my empire. The crystal dome of the Imperial Arena transformed into something that had never existed before in galactic history. A gathering of equals. Emperor Zarthok's declaration had sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives, but instead of chaos, an extraordinary thing began to happen. Representatives of all member systems, the Emperor announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena through the amplification system. I hereby declare the end of the challenge of submission. Virak Thul is no longer a prisoner of the Empire, but a free being choosing to help us build a better future. Maya felt the dragon's relief through their connection. As Virak Thul's musical humming grew stronger and more complex, the harmonics seemed to reach into the arena's structure itself, creating resonances that touched something deep in every listener. Furthermore, the Emperor continued, I am formally requesting that all member systems send their best diplomatic minds to join a new council. We will restructure our empire into a true confederation of equals, with shared governance and mutual benefit. The Thrakian representative stood up slowly, his forearms spread in a gesture of cautious respect. Your Imperial Majesty, with the greatest respect, how do we know this isn't a trap? How do we know that removing the threat of the dragon won't lead to our subjugation through other means? It was a fair question, and one that every other representative was thinking. Emperor Zarthok had ruled absolutely for centuries. Why should they trust him to share power now? Maya looked up at the Emperor. Your Majesty, would you permit me to demonstrate something? At his nod, Maya placed both hands on Virak Thul's massive head and closed her eyes. The dragon's harmonics shifted into patterns that were unlike anything heard before in the arena. What's happening? Ambassador Veltar called from his position in the viewing section. Virak Thul is opening a communication channel, Maya explained, her voice carrying strange undertones that seemed to come from the dragon itself, a direct link to the dragon colonies. The air above the arena began to shimmer, and then something impossible appeared. Three-dimensional projections of dragons materialized in the space above the arena floor, not holograms, but actual real-time images of beings located light-years away. The assembled representatives gasped as they found themselves in the presence of an entire council of dragons. Each creature was magnificent, their scales reflecting colors that had no names in most galactic languages. But what struck everyone most was the obvious intelligence in their eyes and the peaceful grace of their movements. One of the projected dragons spoke, its words translated automatically by the arena's systems. Greetings, Emperor Zarthok of the Galactic Empire. I am Elder Thalvax of the Drakvalian Remnant. We have watched your civilization's growth through our cousin Virak Thul's reports. The Emperor found himself in the unprecedented position of being evaluated rather than doing the evaluating. Elder Thalvax, I welcome contact with your people. I must ask, have your reports on my empire been favorable? Your empire has achieved something remarkable, Elder Thalvax replied. You have brought stability to a galaxy that knew only chaos. You have created prosperity where there was once only warfare. But more importantly, you have done this while allowing member species to maintain their cultural identity and autonomy. Another dragon, its scales the deep blue of nebula clouds, joined the conversation. I am Scholar Nithara. We have studied your legal frameworks, your trade agreements, your diplomatic protocols. Your empire succeeds not because it crushes opposition, but because it provides genuine benefits to all participants. The Zentorian representative leaned forward in her seat. If your people approve of the empire, why have you remained hidden for so long? Scholar Nithara's response carried undertones of ancient sadness. Our species learned hard lessons during the Galactic Wars. We decided that we would only reveal ourselves when we found a civilization that had grown beyond the need for conquest and domination. And you believe the Empire has reached that point? Emperor Zarthok asked. Elder Thalvax's harmonics carried clear approval. The fact that you are even asking that question proves it, Emperor. A ruler who seeks conquest does not voluntarily limit their own power. A ruler who has grown beyond the need for domination might. Maya opened her eyes and looked around the arena. This is what Virak Thul has been waiting for. The moment when your empire became ready for true partnership rather than rule through strength. The Emperor turned to address the assembled representatives. You asked how you could trust me to share power. Here is your answer. Because I am not asking you to trust me alone. I am asking you to trust in something larger than any individual ruler. He gestured toward the projected dragons. Elder Thalvax, would your people be willing to serve as neutral arbiters in the formation of this new confederation? We would be honored, the dragon elder replied. Our species has extensive experience in conflict resolution and cooperative governance. We would gladly share that knowledge. The crystalline representative raised a concern. What guarantees do we have that this transition won't create instability? What happens to trade routes, defense agreements, existing legal frameworks? Scholar Nithara responded before the Emperor could speak. Nothing would change immediately. The transition to confederated governance would be gradual, with extensive consultation and careful planning. The goal is not to destroy what works, but to improve what could work better. Maya felt Virak Thul's excitement through their connection, as the dragon watched centuries of isolation finally coming to an end. The great creature began to sing again, but this time the harmonics were joined by responses from the projected dragons, creating a complex musical conversation that spanned light years. Their planning, Maya translated for the assembled crowd. The dragons are already discussing how to help with the transition. They have technologies that could improve communication between distant systems, making truly representative governance possible across galactic distances. The Emperor looked around the arena one more time, seeing not subjects but potential partners. Representatives, I ask for a preliminary vote. Not a binding commitment, but an indication of interest. Would your systems be willing to participate in planning sessions for a new confederated government structure? One by one, the representatives stood to indicate their agreement. The Thorakians, despite their initial skepticism, were among the first to agree. The process of transforming an empire into a confederation would be complex and challenging, but the benefits of voluntary cooperation seemed to outweigh the risks. When the last representative had voted, the total was unanimous. Every member system was willing to explore the possibility of a new form of galactic governance. Elder Thalvax's harmonics carried deep satisfaction. Emperor Zarthok, you have accomplished something that we did not think possible. You have built an empire so successful that it can voluntarily evolve beyond the need for empire at all. The Emperor looked down at Maya, who was still maintaining her connection with Virak Thul. And what of you, Maya Chen of Earth? You have changed the course of galactic history. What reward would you ask for such service? Maya smiled, and her answer was immediate. I would ask permission to accompany Virak Thul on the journey to reunite with the dragon colonies. I want to help document their knowledge and ensure that the transition to Confederation benefits everyone. Virak Thul's musical response was joyful, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the sound carried no trace of sadness or longing. The dragon was finally going home, and it would not be traveling alone. 6 months later, the most beautiful sight in galactic history unfolded in the skies above Drakvelian Prime. Virak Thul soared through crystalline clouds with 7 other dragons in a formation that spoke of pure joy. For the first time in 3 centuries, the ancient creature was home. Maya watched from the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel that had brought them to the dragon colony. The journey had been everything she had hoped for and more. Virak Thul had proven to be an enthusiastic guide, showing her wonders that no human had ever imagined. The atmospheric conditions here are remarkable. She spoke into her recording device. The dragon homeworld has 3 suns, but the planet's unique crystalline formations in the upper atmosphere create light patterns that change throughout the day. It's like living inside a constantly shifting aurora. The door to the observation deck opened, and Ambassador Veltar joined her. The elderly Altarian had volunteered to head the diplomatic mission to establish formal relations with the dragon colonies. The integration talks are going better than anyone expected, he reported. The dragons have agreed to share their medical technology immediately. The cancer treatment alone could save millions of lives across the Confederation. Maya nodded, still watching Virak Thul dance through the sky with newfound family. What's the latest from the capital? The Emperor, President Zarthok, has announced that the transition to confederated government will be complete within 2 years. Faster than anyone thought possible. It had been remarkable to watch. The former emperor's decision to voluntarily limit his power had created a wave of cooperation that spread across the galaxy. Systems that had maintained minimal compliance with imperial law were now actively participating in Confederation planning sessions. And the other member species? How are they adapting to the changes? Ambassador Veltar's blue skin showed patterns of satisfaction. The Thorakians have volunteered to head the new Confederated Defense Initiative. The Zentorians are coordinating communication networks. Even the Crystalline Collective has offered to share their mining technologies for the common good. Maya smiled. It turns out that beings cooperate much better when they're asked instead of commanded. Indeed. Though I must admit there have been some challenges, such as 3 systems have requested independence from the Confederation entirely. They're concerned that even voluntary cooperation might limit their sovereignty. Maya considered this, and President Zarthok's response. He granted their independence immediately, with offers of continued trade relationships and mutual defense pacts. 2 of the 3 systems have already asked to rejoin as full Confederation members. This was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the transformation. By proving that Confederation membership was truly voluntary, the former empire had become more attractive to potential members than it had ever been under imperial rule. A musical sound from below drew Maya's attention back to the sky. Virak Thul was approaching the observation deck, wings spread wide in a graceful landing pattern. The dragon settled onto the deck with the careful precision that Maya had learned to associate with contentment. "How are you feeling, old friend?" Maya asked, placing her hand on the dragon's snout in their customary greeting. Virakthul's harmonic response was complex, but Maya had learned to read the emotional undertones over their months of travel together. The translation was simple: home. "Virakthul wants to show you something," Maya told Ambassador Veltar. "Something that might interest the Confederation's Scientific Council." The dragon's harmonics shifted to a new pattern, and Maya closed her eyes to receive the full communication. When she opened them again, her expression was amazed. "What is it?" the ambassador asked. "The dragons have been working on something for the past 6 months, a project they started the day Virakthul was freed." Maya activated her portable device and a holographic display appeared above the observation deck. The image showed technical specifications for something that looked like a massive space station, but with organic curves and crystal formations integrated into its structure. "It's a galactic communication hub," Maya explained. "Using Dragon Harmonic Resonance technology, it would allow instantaneous communication between any points in the galaxy. No more delays in Confederation meetings due to light-speed transmission lag." Ambassador Veltar studied the specifications with growing excitement. The implications for democratic governance across galactic distances would be revolutionary, Maya finished. "Direct democracy becomes possible when every citizen can participate in discussions and votes in real time, regardless of which star system they live in." Virakthul made another musical sound, and Maya listened carefully before translating. "The dragons want to offer this technology as their first official contribution to the Confederation. They see it as a way to ensure that what happened to their species never happens to anyone else." "What do you mean?" Maya's expression grew thoughtful. "The dragon species was scattered and traumatized because they lacked the political unity to defend themselves during the galactic wars. They want to help create a governmental system so robust and inclusive that it can't be destroyed by internal conflict or external threat." The sound of approaching aircraft drew their attention to the horizon. A small fleet of Confederation vessels was arriving for the formal establishment of diplomatic relations. Representatives from over 40 star systems had come to witness the dragon's reintegration into galactic civilization. "Maya," Ambassador Veltar said quietly, "I have a question that President Zarthok asked me to pose to you." "What's that?" "Would you consider accepting appointment as the Confederation's first Director of Interspecies Understanding? The position would involve traveling to newly contacted civilizations and helping to facilitate peaceful first contact." Maya looked at Virakthul, who responded with harmonics that clearly indicated approval and support. The dragon had taught her much about the art of understanding beings who were vastly different from herself. "I would be honored," she replied, "but I have one condition." "Which is?" "Virakthul comes with me. I've learned that the best way to understand someone is to approach them with a friend who can sense their true emotions and intentions." The dragon's musical laughter filled the air around the observation deck. For a creature that had spent 3 centuries in forced isolation, the prospect of exploring the galaxy and meeting new species was the perfect expression of freedom. As the Confederation vessels settled onto the landing platforms below, Maya reflected on how much had changed since that day in the Imperial arena. A single act of courage and compassion had transformed not just one dragon's life, but the entire structure of galactic civilization. "You know," she said to Virakthul, "when I was a little girl on Earth, I dreamed of exploring the stars and making friends with alien species. I never imagined that the first alien I'd befriend would teach me that the most important exploration isn't of space, but of the hearts and minds of other beings." Virakthul's harmonic response was warm with affection and agreement. The dragon had learned something similar, that freedom wasn't just about physical liberty, but about the ability to connect with others in understanding and mutual respect. Together, they watched as representatives from across the galaxy prepared to formally welcome the dragons back into the galactic community. It was the beginning of a new era, one built not on fear or domination, but on the simple truth that Maya had demonstrated in the arena. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is extend your hand in friendship, even when, especially when, everyone else believes it's impossible. The galaxy was about to discover just how powerful that simple truth could be.